Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome again. This is going to be the 2021 financial recap and the 2022 budget. I would ask that if you don't have questions, stay muted, and then when you do, just unmute yourself, ask a question and mute yourself again. It'll make it a lot easier than me having to try and go in and mute you. So, and I also won't have to deal with raising hands and things. So you can ask questions as we go along, but I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I have quite a number of documents. I'll get through them as quickly as I can to get to the budget itself. Oh, Tara, you need to give me screen sharing ability.
I did. You got it.
Okay. Okay, now I do. It said I was disabled, but. Okay. This is the end of the year treasurer's report. And as it says in the upper right-hand corner, we are 100% complete. Going through the items quickly, in 401 pledges and gifts, we came in at about 92% of budget. So we were $9.6 or $9,600 under budget. And that was primarily people who, well, half of it was people who have left or died. And the other was what we just didn't collect. In unpledged gifts, we were at 90% of budget, 89.92% of budget, 8,200 under, and same thing. And many of you will recall that unpledged gifts consists of two categories. One is people who pledged in 2020 who did not pledge in 2021, but we expected to receive a pledge or donations nonetheless. And then a small group of people who donate through designated gift funds, which prohibit contractual pledges. And just to be safe, those of us who do that just don't call it a pledge, but still make the church aware of what the giving will be. So those are the two categories. We were 8,200 under budget. Christmas was under budget. Easter was under budget. Again, neither of those is surprising because we tend to get what people call the C&E Christians, the Christmas and Easter people who come for just those services. And since we didn't have in-person services this year, those numbers, as expected, were down. Overall, $18,400 under budget for offering plate income. On the flip side, administrative income was over budget. We were under about $2,000 in building usage. Again, not surprising because we didn't have the same building usage we normally would. Bank interest was just my mistake. We came in at the right number, and I had used prior numbers, but had failed to take into consideration that we had much lower interest rates. So that was totally on me. Miscellaneous income was way over budget. Miscellaneous income generally consists of Kroger, with people who use the Kroger cards and designated a charity. We get money from Kroger and also royalties on a book about Henry Ford. This year, it also includes the 5% portion of an undesignated gift under our undesignated gift policy. So that's why that one is so far over budget. And then investment income, as I had said last year, we knew that if the land sale closed, which it did in May, we would have more money invested, which would yield more dividends. And in fact, that is the case. So we came in at 216% of budget, $16,000 over budget. So administrative income, we were $15,000 over budget, whereas we were $18,000 under budget for offering plate income, for a net of about $3,500 under budget on the income side. Expenses, I'm going to go through quickly because really everything was within budget with few exceptions. One of them is the Vestry sent Christmas notes to the parish. So we paid postage for that. That was not in the budget. So that put that over budget. Let's see what else we have. A minor overage on the website. Salaries and benefits, everything was within budget with the exception of the bookkeeper. And that's because we had two bookkeepers for the first part of the year. Colleen Brown resigned and Emily Fishwick took over. So for the first approximately 3 months, we were paying two people, Colleen to do the books and train Emily, and Emily to be trained. So we had anticipated we would be over budget, but we were only over by 6%. So it really was not too bad. The rest of that was within budget. Overall salaries and benefits at 95%. So that's very good. Office costs, again, a couple of line items were over budget, but overall we were within budget at 98%. And then buildings and grounds, we had the rectory was a little bit over on utilities, and that could be from a number of things, including the sewer problems that we had and water and all of that, but well under budget overall. Same thing with comprehensive insurance. We were over budget by 5%. That is because we keep asking what our next premium will be, and they don't tell us, so we guess, and every year we guess too low. So, but again, total was within budget. Total expenses, 93% of budget. So we gained $20,000 or so on the expense side. And adding that to the income, we ended up $17,000 better than budget. So our deficit was $44,295 versus a budgeted deficit of $61,301. So that's $17,000 better, roughly. And then we had two one-time occurrences. We got our PPP loan, which we received in 2020, forgiven. That was effective, I think, January 3rd. So that's why it's in 2021. But that was forgiven. So we got to keep the cash with no repayment obligation. We also, when Emily came on board, found a lot of voided checks that had been, or a lot of checks that had been hanging out there that had never been cashed. And in many cases, we had sent a check, it didn't get cashed. We got a bill for the current month and the prior month. We paid that bill and never voided the other check. So we went through, Emily cleaned up all of that. So we gained another $5,900 on paper. This didn't put any cash in our pocket because the bank accounts didn't reflect a check that was written but not cashed. They only reflect checks that are written and cashed. But on our books, we cleaned that up. So that brought us to a net deficit of $7,159. And yesterday at the Vestry meeting, the Vestry authorized that to be paid from the endowment. So $7,159 is where we ended up. And if you look in the last few years, 46,912 was the 2020 deficit, 29,768 was the 2019 deficit. So really in line with all of those. And overall, a very good year under very trying circumstances. So before I go on to some more 2021 documents, does anybody have any questions about the treasurer's report? Silence as assent. I will move on to the next document. There we go. Now I want to show you our funds matrix. We call this the funds matrix. Let me go up to the top. This is our statement of net assets, and it comes from our statement of financial position. Just want to highlight a few things. One is you'll now see a line item called land sale proceeds. And as of the end of the year, we had $1,168,799 in the land sale proceeds account. I'm going to go to another document that's going to show a change in that number, but for year-end purposes, that's what we had, $1,168,799. And then we have the various other accounts. The big thing to watch is this diocesan fund, because that's where we get dividends. The rest of these accounts, Comerica, whether it's checking or money market, ATM, and Ford Interest Advantage, we get very small interest on any of those. So we try to keep as much money as possible in the diocesan fund. And this says 3.31. The new dividend is a little bit higher than that. I think we're at around a 4% per share. So it's not based on the dollar value, it's based on the number of shares that you own. And I'll have to update this, but we're getting about 4%. So that this big over $1 million that we had invested is going to throw off a lot of income for next year, as we'll be talking about. And then all the other accounts, 105,000 in endowment and 217,000 in the Bergeron fund. And then the other item, you'll see $51,338 in dedicated accounts. As many of you are going to be aware from the past, here are our dedicated accounts. Most of these are funds that we both hold and own, but not all of them. So Dearborn Area Interfaith Network, that's money that we hold on behalf of Dane. The Shidocon Martial Arts Fund, that is for the Shidocon group. That is not our money, but we're holding it for them, and then we disperse it as they tell us. Same thing with Community Garden. Community Garden, we treat as a separate group so that they have their own funds to buy fertilizer and materials and other things. And then the last one would be Mother of the Savior. We have some money that we hold on their behalf. Everything else is ours. It may be restricted for certain uses, but it's our money. So that comes down to the same $51,338 that you saw on the previous screen. So I'm going to jump, because it's going to be the same document, to another version of that. And I think it will be helpful for you to see another version that I had created by Emily Fishwick. And I want to say here, and I'll probably say a number of times throughout the presentation, Emily is phenomenal. I'm able to get a lot of reports out from her that I hadn't requested before, and maybe hadn't even considered before. So we're really lucky. We have a CPA now doing bookkeeping work. That is not the normal course of things, but we're very lucky to be in that situation. So you'll see this looks just like what I showed you, except the numbers are different. Okay, Kevin, why are you changing the numbers? Well, here's the reason. Remember I showed you we had $1 million and change in the diocesan fund for land sale proceeds, but now we only have $894,000. Why? What'd you do, Kevin? Well, here's why I had this created and why I'm explaining this to you. We knew that the land sale proceeds would be used for various things in connection with operation of the church. One of those things is replacement reserve. We had talked way back when we first talked about the land sale that we needed to have a rainy day fund to use for unexpected and necessary repairs to the church. So what we did was we moved some of the money from land sale proceeds into this replacement reserve because this was a zero before. We also moved some money into Claybush, which had been shown as negative on the in the dedicated accounts. So we moved money out of here, but we have the same total. So this $1,733,668 is the same number that was on the other sheet. We just moved the cash around. So this report is actually as of 1/1/2022. That's why they're different numbers, although they look like the same format. The way the diocesan fund works is we have to tell them on December 15th what we want to do. They then make the changes effective January 1. So the previous report I showed you showed where we ended the year, 12/31/21, and this is where we started the year, 1/1/22.
Kevin?
So yes.
So all the time I've been here, 11 years, and looking at this budget, I didn't understand that when you tell Mark Miliotto what to do with the money we have in the growth and income fund, that he allocates certain portions to certain accounts. So we didn't take the money out of growth and income, but Mark Miliotto is tracking it differently, and so are we. So it's held in the same place. We just show it differently. And I thought that was really interesting to me. I didn't realize that.
Right. We have separate accounts for each of these line items. We now have something called land sale proceeds. We have something called Greenwood Renaissance. We have something called Claybush. We have something called replacement reserve, and then Borgeson, endowment, and Bergeron. So you're right, Terry. To be fair, though, we did actually withdraw some money as well.
Yeah.
But we are separately tracking it. We did not take out this $165,000 from the diocesan fund. We just reallocated it to a different fund that is ours. So yeah, that's a really good clarification. Thank you.
And so we're still earning the same.
Yep.
So it's not dollars. I also didn't know it wasn't dollars. I didn't realize it was shares. And so,
It's
but
shares.
because we have so much money in that fund, we have more shares anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's a really good lead into my next slide. So let me show you, find which one I want here. Land sale. Okay. So we told the parish we would be transparent with you about what happens with the land sale money. And this is our report as of 12/31. We received out of the 1.3 million, which was the purchase price, $1,232,205. That's after all the expenses, the broker's commission, title costs, recording fees, all of that. And of that, we spent almost $50,000 on the garden relocation. And you may recall, we had estimated $60,000. It may end up being $60,000 when all is said and done, but as of 2021, we had spent $50,000. That brought us to $1,182,521. And then again, as Terry said, and I had mentioned, it's shares, not dollars, but the shares have a dollar value. So they went up and down throughout the year, but the market adjustment was about, you look at that, that's about a 1% adjustment or loss. So we're at $1,168,000 to close the year on land sale proceeds. The thing about a growth and income fund is the growth component is volatile. So when the market goes up, it tends to go up. When the market goes down, it tends to go down. But it's also an income fund. So it is throwing off cash. So it is more conservatively invested than a pure growth fund, but it is more aggressively invested than a pure income fund, thus the name, growth and income. So we're trying to get both out of the investment. So that's where we ended up the year in the land sale proceeds. Now that's going to look different on those other reports occasionally, because this is tracking all expenses and even market adjustments in and out. And we'll have a similar report available next year because we're tracking everything. Same thing here. Again, I'm just trying to be as transparent as I can here. And I almost hate that word transparent, because you hear it so much about people who say they're being transparent and then they're not. But I really am trying to be transparent here. We also had 2 floods, as everybody, many people are painfully aware. We received $75,454 in insurance payments. We had expenses of $80,000. So we had to take $4,900 out of the replacement reserve to pay that shortfall. For this year, we are projecting another insurance payment of $10,388, but expenses of $25,388. So another $15,000 coming out of replacement reserve. So if you look at that, that's $20,000 coming out of replacement reserve. And there it is, $19,926. So as I said, we're using land sale proceeds for replacement reserve. So that's one of the places that the money is going, is replacement reserve to pay these kinds of expenses. So the total cost was, the total cost was $105,700 and some odd dollars for the flood. And of that, we received $86,000 and change, the difference being what we had to pay out of pocket. So our insurance premiums were $13,400 or so. And for that, we got $85,000 plus of proceeds. That's why one buys insurance. I will say that we are looking at taking steps, including a backflow preventer in 2022 to try to stop this from happening again. And for those of you who don't know, I'll give you a real quick explanation. The flooding that we have had this time and in the past is not coming through our walls. It is coming up through the sewer because of the way the Dearborn system is set up. When the sewers are overwhelmed by rainfall and other things, the water has no place to go. It can't all go out through the sewage system, so it comes back up into houses, or in our case, the church basement. So we're going to put something called a backflow preventer to stop that from happening in the future. That will be another replacement reserve expense in 2022. And the Property Commission, Michael Mrochek and Diana Brehab will be working on that through the year. And I think they already have one estimate. So let me stop there. That is my recap of 2021. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? The treasurer's report, the funds, the land sale, or the insurance?
Yeah, I have a question, and I'm really not that familiar with this, but were there FEMA funds that were also available
That's a real
for
good,
the flooding that took place?
yeah, that's a really good question, Rob. I know we applied for FEMA. Diana Brehab is on. She might be able to answer better. I know we have not received any FEMA funds, but we did apply for them. Diana, do you have anything to add there?
Okay.
We did not apply for FEMA funds. At the time, it was not authorized for organizations. So we did not apply.
Okay,
Has
but I
that
know
since
that,
changed or no? I mean, as far as organizations being able to
No,
apply.
no, Erin could actually answer this a little bit better. She's not on, but Erin got involved with FEMA because they are doing some awareness work and they were trying to get groups involved in it. But the resources, both in 2014 and in 2021, none of them were available for organizations. They were all house-based or responses that we could access.
so Rob, thanks for the question, because obviously I did not even have the right information on that. I knew that we had met with FEMA, we had tried, but it turns out we weren't eligible because this flooding was in the church itself. It was not in the two houses. We had other problems with the houses, but they were not flooding related. So not FEMA eligible.
Okay. You know, I have one other question about that, and I apologize because my internet, I'm having some issues with it, so there may be a lag. But I was under the impression that right down the street from there was a big retention
You're
facility
correct.
that was built to prevent these issues. So does that mean that this stuff is just going to keep happening no matter what they do, or?
That another great question, and I could go into a lot of the history on public utilities in Dearborn, but I'll give you the short story. The original proposal, and it was called the CSO project, Combined Sewer Overflow Project, was to build a lot of big pits throughout Dearborn to hold excess runoff. So there's one across from the fire station on Outer Drive. There's one on Military just down the street from us. There's a small one literally across the street from my house, right by the river. And those have proven to be ineffective, just as you said. So what has been happening since they determined, despite the amount of money that was put into this, that was ineffective, is now they are separating storm from sanitary. So all of these projects where the roads are dug up and you see all of these big pipes being put in, that is the separation of the two systems. And that's good for Dearborn, it separates it. Unfortunately, with the Rouge River, everybody upstream is not necessarily doing that. So if you're in Farmington Hills or you're in Northville or wherever you may, Livonia, if they haven't separated their sewers, the Rouge River is still continuing to overflow. And anybody who lives near Ford Field, as we do, I mean, that overflow is so that the entire parking lot is flooded. And that's an ongoing problem, but at least in Dearborn, the way it's being addressed is through the separation. They still have the CSO facilities, which are there and being operated, but those are more of a backstop, and the separation is the new preferred method, is my understanding, and I am no expert on this.
Yeah, I thought they were in conjunction with each other, and I thought that the project was for anybody going through Detroit water system. So I know in Livonia they've been doing that because I see where they have a lot of areas dug up, and I know they have the retention ponds. I was just curious as to, did they see like an end to this at some point?
I
where
wish I knew the
there's a
answer to that.
system that can handle
Yeah.
the heavy rain, but anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, that was my question.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on anything on 2021? Okay, now I'm going to share my screen and go to what you're probably all really interested in, which is what our new budget is. Okay, let me go to the top first. So this is, we call it a vision forecast. The term in the business world would be budget, but this is what we are forecasting going forward. And because I think everybody wants to get to the bottom line, at least that's the way I think about these things, I'm going to take you right there, and then I'm going to go back to the top to look at how we got to where we ended up. So, as I said, and again, for reference purposes, AS is 2019, AW is 2020, AZ is the budget for 2021, BC is the actual for 2021, BD is the for 2022. And there's no sense hiding it because we knew you're going to see it when we got to the end. We are forecasting an $82,000, approximately $82,000 deficit. Much bigger as you go across here. You see we had 44.2 last year. We had 46.9 the year before and 29.7 the year before. Why is that? Well, it's going to be pretty obvious when I show you back at the front. So we're going to start with income, just as I did with the treasurer's report. Our parish pledges for 2022, we are budgeting $96,749. And the way we came to that number is we took the actual pledge cards received, we subtracted this $1,000 of prepaid, which is somebody who paid their 2022 pledge in 2021. So we took that difference, we multiplied it by 98%. And that's where we get this 96,749. Why 98%, you may ask? And that would be a very good question. The answer is, as with this past year, we budgeted 116,000, we received 106. So there was a shortfall. So rather than expect to get 100% of what people have pledged, because we know that there are circumstances that change, everything from death to move to loss of job to illness, you name it, we are discounting the amount by 2%. And that 2% is the same discount that the diocese applies to the apportionment money that it receives from churches. So we're being consistent with the diocese, and we're trying to cut the gap between actual and budget. We'll see how it works out. We've played with this before. We've done as much as 3%. We've done 0. But that's how we calculated it. I will say though, that in 2021, we received 36 pledges. In 2022, we received 37 pledges. So the number of pledging units is actually up versus last year, but the dollar amount is down. And the way that happens frequently is a large donor dies or moves, or you have retirements, or you have other things that factor in so that income goes down. So more pledges, but fewer dollars. Same thing when we go to 406 unpledged gifts. And as I mentioned before, the non-pledged component, that is people who pledged in 2021, but did not pledge in 2022. but we expect to receive their funds. So we've taken out people who moved, people who died, people who we know will not be able to pledge. We've taken them out of the number. We multiplied that by 98%. And then we added to that, there are currently 3 pledging units, which are families or however you want to define it. Those are the people who are using donor advised funds. We take those at 100% because that's money that's already been set aside. So we don't discount that number. That gets us to $60,000. So right there, we've got a $14,000 difference between last year's actual and this year's budget. And up above, we have a $10,000 difference. So that's $19,000 difference just in straight offering plate. Loose offerings, again, I don't want to go into a lot of detail here. We just set $1,000 for all of these because we don't know if we're going to have in-person services or not. And that's close to what the budget or what the actual was from last year. So the bottom line, we are $25,000 short of last year's actual. So remember, I said we've got an $82,000 deficit versus a 44 actual. Well, there's 25,000 of it right there. So moving down, building usage, we're hoping for a little bit more usage. So I went up to $16,000. I fixed my mistake for bank interest. So we're back where we think we should be. Miscellaneous income, we changed it for this year. Book royalties, which I mentioned, Kroger, which I mentioned, and online fees. With the new online giving system, Vanco, people can agree to pay the processing fees that we have to pay to Vanco. And it's just like if you're at a merchant, it's 3% all in roughly for a credit card, and it's about 1% if you use ACH or coming directly out of your bank account. But so people who do that will get full credit. So if you had a $2,000 pledge and you paid $20 of processing fees, your year-end statement would show $2,020. But we didn't want to put that full $220 up in parish pledges because it would overstate it. We recognize it as income, so we're going to track it down here in miscellaneous income, and we'll see what happens. So roughly what we've done is book royalties and Kroger, we're figuring about $350. So the other $605 is what we think people might pay in the processing fees. We're just putting it down here rather than up here, just so that it makes it easier for us to see how people do against their actual pledge. But again, for donors, you get full credit for the full amount given. We're just accounting for it in 2 different places. And then investment income, as I mentioned, we now have the land sale proceeds for the full year. And if we never touched anything from the way it stood as of 1/1/22, that was the second spreadsheet I showed you, we would get about $48,000 of dividends from the Growth and Income Fund, plus $200 from the Opportunity Resource Fund. But we know we're going to need to use some of that money. I already showed you $20,000 of replacement reserve funds that we'll be using. There's work that's going to be done on the steeple. There's the backflow preventer. So what I had Emily do is calculate our dividends, assuming the first quarter we get the full dividend, and then assume we take $50,000 out for the second quarter, and we take $50,000 out for the third quarter. So each time you take it out, you don't get dividends on that money anymore. So that's where we came to this 46,845. And then the other thing that part of that, those $50,000 withdrawals will be used for is that $7,000 deficit that I already said was coming out of the endowment per the vestry. So we're up $16,000 from last year, but that's how we calculate it. So our administrative income is up, and our total income is $9,000 below last year's actual income. So that $9,000, if you added that to the $44,000, so now you're at $53,000 of deficit before we get to expenses. So let me stop real quickly because I just said a lot of words. Does anybody have questions about income, either how it was calculated or any other concerns? Oh, I should also mention that we will be sending PDFs of the treasurer's report and the budget to everybody, or at least they will be available. They'll be distributed electronically, and then they'll be available at the annual meeting next week as well.
Right,
So-
they'll be in the annual meeting booklet that's produced tomorrow and emailed to everybody, and also available next Sunday. We're trying not to do hard copy versions of it because it's so many pages, but we can do a few if people want them.
Yep. So you will have a chance to look at this, and if there are any questions when you have hard copy or you have your PDF, please reach out to me. I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you might have. Moving on to
Kevin?
expense. Yes,
Sorry, one quick question.
sure.
What's the Opportunity Resource Fund? I mean, is that located within the diocese as well?
It is. It
Okay.
used to be called the McGee Fund, which was think of it as a micro loan fund. It's a fund that gathers resources from various donors and then turns around and lends that money at advantageous interest rates to startups, low-income projects, things that are within its mission statement. So we have 2 Opportunity Resource Fund loans. One is for $5,000, and that one we chose not to take interest from them. So that we don't get anything from that loan. That's more outreach on our part. And then the second one, we are taking 2%. That's a $10,000 fund. So we get $200 a year from the Opportunity Resource Fund. And that's just interest on our loan. But it's it's our money. We can ask for it to be paid back at any
Kevin,
time.
I think it's only true for one of them. I think the Vestry years ago determined that one of them was going to stay with Opportunity Resource and one of them we could get back. I don't think we can get them both back. So we should check that out.
I think we just said we wouldn't get interest on it. I don't think we ever forgave the loan.
So it's something to explore.
Yeah.
We'll look at that.
Okay. So moving to expenses, a portion or diocesan pledge, that's in diocesan vernacular, it's called an apportionment. And this is essentially a 10% tithe by churches to the diocese to fund diocesan operations. And you'll see that it has declined over the years and has declined again this year to 26,960. That is because the way it is calculated is on a rolling 3-year average. So they look back at our income for the 3 prior years, and so that would not include 2021 because they wouldn't have that number yet. So they're looking at 18, 19, and 20. they look at that, they take 10% of that total, that comes to the 26,960. And given the way our income is going, this number will continue to go down. We are one of the probably minority of parishes that have paid 100% apportionment every year that I'm aware of. And I've been with the church for 30 plus years. Because for a number of reasons. One, we believe in the concept of tithing. Two, we get an awful lot out of the diocese, much more than what we pay in. So we're sort of Kentucky in the federal scheme of things. You know, we give so much in taxes, but we take even more out. Not necessarily the example that our liberal friends might want, and I count myself in that group, but for those of you who are familiar with the federal system, that would be a good example. We put in, but we also take out. So that's how that's calculated. Rector discretionary or clergy discretionary, but it's only the rector right now. $1,200. That's been the case for before Terry. That is money that the clergy receives to then redistribute as they see fit for people in need or charitable causes. It is not compensation to the clergy. It is a fund for the clergy to use to help the parish and the community. And then the food pantry we're showing only $100. We spent nothing last year. Two reasons for that. One is food pantry is semi-dormant right now because of COVID. But two is we have over $6,000 in our food pantry account in the dedicated funds. So until that is spent, there's no reason to budget more money because we have plenty of money to fund food scarcity needs, at least for the coming year and probably well beyond. Worship, not a whole lot to talk about here, except that you'll see instrument maintenance has gone up. That's because, yes, we'll have 2 piano tunings, which we had in 2021, but the organ contract ends for 2022. So the cost to tune the organ, we will have to pay out of pocket rather than out of the organ refurbishment contract that we previously had. Everything else is zero except for outdoor landscaping and flowers. That was zero last year. It tends to be donated by a parishioner, but we cannot count on it being donated by anybody. So we've budgeted $200 there. Education, you see, is pretty much zero with the exception of stewardship. And that's because we have the Borgeson Education Fund, which has money in it that we can use for any of our educational needs. So again, it's not that we don't intend to do any education. It's just that we don't need to use the budget for that. We have other sources of funds. And same thing for the vestry. If the vestry has to do a training that has a cost to it, or they want to buy a book for all the vestry to read, we'll use education funds. The postage that we had last year for vestry, we've now moved down into the Pastoral Care Commission. So that's down here. So it's no longer going to come out of vestry activities. On parish life, again, until the building is used fully, we probably won't get back to the $2,000 a year that we had been spending. Right now, we're spending primarily for masks, cleaning supplies, gloves, those kinds of things. So we upped the numbers a little bit. So we have $1,000 in the budget for this year. We had $1,500 in the budget for last year, but we only spent $650 last year. The other thing is we have, I think about $300 from the bishop to use for an ice cream social for the parish and the community when we can actually do that. So it's not included in these numbers, but it is being held and reserved for that purpose. Evangelism, I'm going to cross 2 pages here. We took some of the money out of what was in website and we put it into something we're now calling online presence. So we split that 612. You see, they don't total the same. Part of it is staying in the website, the cost of the domain name and a couple of other licensing fees, online presence, Zoom, and other expenses. And then we have another one for online down below. So that's how we got to those. So those are all the easy expense categories. Anybody have any questions on any of those? I didn't expect any really, because that, as I say, they're pretty simple. Everybody likes to look at salaries and benefits because everybody likes salaries and benefits, and it's the biggest single item of our budget. What did we do? Well, you'll see I'm starting with the Rector only because the Rector is the first one on the list. For 2019, 2020, 2021, we did no raises. I did not look back at 2018. There might have been a raise in 2018, but for the last 3 years, the compensation for the Rector, the office manager, and the sexton has stayed flat. And that has been an ethical problem, I will put it that way, for us as a congregation. We are not looking to deprive our staff of resources, but we kept running deficits. We kept running deficits. We kept saying, okay, sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry. This year we said, enough apologizing, enough sorry. We've got inflation that's way up. We are going to give raises this year. We now have funds to pay for it through the land sale. We're fortunate on that. And it is the right thing to do. So the raises that we gave, so you can see the Rector's salary went up to 51.5, the office manager went to 32.5, and the sexton went to 16. And that's 16 plus housing. And in the Rector's case, it's 51.5 plus housing as well, and utilities. We didn't do straight percentages. We just decided to do round numbers. And when I say we, I'm really talking to Vestry, because the Finance Commission and the Treasurer have no authority to set salaries. That is on the Vestry, but I'm saying the royal we here. Roughly 5% and change for the Rector. For the office manager, a little bit less than 5%, but close to, and for the sexton, a little bit over 5%. But again, that was more making round numbers, not a judgment. This wasn't a performance review. This was let's get people to the right level, recognizing the sacrifices that we've asked for the last 3 years, at least. The rest of the numbers are either per letter of agreement or per past practice. You can see last year there was no Rector travel because nobody could travel last year, but we're still budgeting $1,800 for travel, which hopefully part of that will be available for the sabbatical, which keeps being deferred for the same reason, inability to travel. Supply clergy, the rate went up to $220 per Sunday. So 5 Sundays, that's $1,100. You might ask, well, why can't Halim cover all of this? There's reason for that. One, Halim is only 1/3 at Christ Church, not full-time. So it's not fair to expect a 1/3 clergy to cover all of those Sundays. And we just have to be fair to him as well and recognize that supply clergy is to be expected. So we have budgeted for 5 Sundays. Biggest change besides the raises is we're starting to put in some music money, hoping that we're going to see a return to in-person service. And even if we don't, as in today's service, there was the pre-recorded music that has a cost too. So we have $3,600 for choir master and $7,250 for the organist. But I really look at that as one category. So we have $10,850 for music. So that's substitute musicians, supplementary musicians, pre-recorded music, Lent music, summer music, and any other music. So we're trying to budget as if we're actually going to operate the way we used to, but we don't know. So we way underspent the budget last year, and we could way underspend it again, but we wanted the money to be available. The bookkeeper, as I said, we had 2 last year, so we were over budget. We went back to the previous budget, and we're comfortable with that. Medicare, insurance, life, all of that is really formulaic or determined by the diocese. The one thing I will note is Terry turns 65 next month. No surprise there. That means that she will be eligible for Medicare. But her husband, Dan, is not 65. And we provide coverage for the family unit, not for the individual. So because of turning 65 and Terry being eligible for Medicare, we may be able to get a reduction in our premiums at the rate of, well, this says $1,870 per month. That's not correct. I need to fix that. But the total is $3,740, and let me just do some quick here. So this should actually be $374 per month. So voila, when you're looking at this, you'll see $3,740 per month is the reduction that we would receive. And if it's effective March 1, that would be $3,740. So we expect that line 628 is going to be $3,740 lower. So keep that in mind when you're thinking deficit as well. And I pointed.
It won't decrease when Dan turns 65. It doesn't matter. It only matters for me. It's just the way they do it for clergy. So we're not going to get another reduction next year when he's 65. It only works for me. As I understand. All right. And so as soon as I turn 65, well, we had to apply last year. You had to apply, a couple months in advance. And as soon as it kicks in, then it starts to work for me. But it won't ever change what we pay for him, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, and that's fine. I mean, that's part of the letter of agreement, but it's still a benefit to the parish this year, and it'll carry over into next year as well. That'll be a going forward reduction. So the total raises that we gave, in a sense, are offset by this $3,740, not completely. But even if we'd given no raises, we were still going to have the savings, assuming it's all approved, and we expect that it will be. So you see, we've got about a $20,000 increase in salaries and benefits overall. And that is the raises and the increase in music primarily. And again, the raises have a ripple effect. In case you're it affects the clergy pension, it affects the laity pension, it affects FICA, it affects Medicare, it affects everything that is salary related. Office costs, I don't want to spend a lot of time except on machine maintenance, online fees. You heard me say that we're going to have processing fees that we have to pay. Oh, let me see, I got a chat here. Oh, okay. Thank you. You're welcome. The online fees, we have to pay whether the donor covers them or doesn't cover them. If we receive them from a donor, we will put the income side up above where I showed. But we're going to have all of those fees that we have to pay, even if they're covered. So in line 657 now, we're going to track the online giving fees. We did not have this option available in 2021 until the month of December. So we don't have any history to go on. So this is a total guess as to what our online giving fees are going to be. And I would tell you, frankly, I would like this number to be high, because the more online giving, the better for administration of the books and records. It is less work by the office manager and the bookkeeper if we get money online than having to do a physical check, do a bank count, do a bank deposit, reconcile everything. It's much easier electronically. And that is the way of the world. Churches and other nonprofits are going to that, and it's becoming a larger and larger percentage of giving. And then there are other costs. That 2780 is not all online fees. You'll see we had $2,500 last year. This is looking at a reduction in some of the machine and computer maintenance fees and an increase in online fees. For example, our lease is up on the copier. We may end up eliminating the second copier. That could save some of these expenses, etc. Postage is up because we expect to do more mailings this year, and the cost of postage itself is up. Supplies and paper, we went with the same budget as last year. Our equipment lease fees and taxes were lower this past year, so we rounded up, but less than the budget. But you can see our overall office costs that we're forecasting are pretty much the same as last year's budget and last year's actual. And then the last category is buildings and grounds. I told you it was a guess. I'm guessing again. How much are the premiums going to go up? Well, they went up $1,000 or $1,100 from 19 to 20. They went up a little bit less than $1,100 from 20 to 21. So I went with $1,200 and change for 2022. We don't know. We did have claims that could have an effect, although we are underwritten on a global policy for the diocese. So our claims may or may not affect our premiums. We will have to wait and see, but that's our guesstimate. Contracted grounds, basically the same as last year. We're reducing grounds, not to zero, but just to recognize that we're not using as much in grounds, and some of the expenses that might have been in grounds could end up being taken up with the capital projects that we're going to use replacement reserve for. Building maintenance, the property commission is forecasting a little bit less same reasons, so 11,000 versus 12,000. Telephone and internet, we are going pretty much with what we had last year, which was 2,700. Utilities, we think for the church could even go down because one of the repairs that was made recently had to do with the efficiency of the zoning of the church. So we may see a reduction, but rates have gone up. So we're forecasting a little bit of an increase. Same with the rectory. There, we didn't have those same changes to efficiency, and rates have gone up. And then same with the sexton. So $73,000 is the budget that we have for buildings and grounds versus the 74,000 last year and the 64 actual, so about 9,000 higher than actual. So our expenses are up about $28,000 from last year's actual and about $8,000 from last year's budget. And that brings us to a total of $81,980. My best guess is we will do better than this, particularly if things return to semi-normal. But we have to go with what the reality is at the moment, not what we hope the reality will be in the future. So if we follow past practice, that would also be paid out of endowment. So that 81,000 plus this 71, between the two of those, you've got $89,000. That will use up almost all of the endowment, but not affecting, this money will not affect the money that we got from the land sale. So we still have a lot of funds available to fund projects going forward. That is the entire presentation. I'm going to stop sharing, but I can open anything up. If anybody has questions about any line items, just tell me what document or what category, and I can open something back up. I'm not going to wait long because I just as soon not have questions, but I also want to be fair and I want to give you the opportunity. So please, if you have a question, let me know. And if not, thank you for your attention. And I think we're done. Terry?
Thank you, Kevin, so much. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate your really thoughtful, clear, concise way of presenting this and all the work that you and the Finance Commission and the Vestry have put into preparing this. And we go forward into 2022 with a pretty daunting deficit, but we're getting used to that, getting used to daunting deficits, and that coming out usually better at the end of the year. So we'll hope for the same thing this year too. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Kevin.
Bye now.